Okay, simple summary for week one. The way this assignment works is I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to try to keep it short. That's why I don't have multiple images up here. I just have the one picture of the depiction of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln behind me. I'm going to tell you a very basic version of the story. You listen to the story, and then you write a minimum one paragraph summary and answer the questions. That's how you complete the assignment. The important part here is for the whole point is for you to listen. It's not for you to go to look up the Lincoln assassination or paste a bunch of stuff in or use ChatGPT. The whole point is for you to listen to me as a human being listening to a human being, and then write that information out to sort of prove by writing conversationally in your own words that you listened to the story. That's all this assignment is. Okay, so the story is, and you can see the gruesome ending behind me. In April of 1865, after 4 long, miserable, bloody years, the Civil War finally came to an end. And this was theoretically the end of President Lincoln's suffering. He had worried about the future of the United States for every moment of those 4 years, and had suffered and had been at the telegraph office, at the War Department late at night waiting for dispatches from the front. On the morning of April 14th, 1865, which was a Good Friday, Lincoln seemed to be in a better mood than he had been. He seemed a little less stressed and glum and depressed about the state of affairs. And that afternoon he went for a carriage ride with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, and he spoke to her in a way that he had not in a few years. He said that, we need to try to be happy again, and was in a better mood. And Mrs. Lincoln said, "I've not seen you act like this in a long time." And he said, "Well, it's well that I should act this way, because I consider today the day that the war has ended." And they rode in peace and quiet, and they talked about what they wanted to do over the next few years while Lincoln was president. They talked about where they wanted to live when his term in office was over. He mentioned wanting to travel overseas and visit Israel, which he referred to as the Holy Land, and just had a pleasant afternoon. This was in marked contrast to his moods over the previous few weeks, where he had even apparently dreamed of his own assassination. This is an oft-told story, and people doubt it, but it's pretty well sourced that he told friends, including his wife, that he had a dream in which inside the dream, he got up and walked downstairs in the White House and saw a coffin laying in the East Room of the White House. And he asked the guard there who it was, and the guard said, again, within the dream, the president. He was killed by an assassin. And so that's a bit spooky. Lincoln didn't believe in anything necessarily obviously supernatural, that he knew he was going to be assassinated, but he did know that a lot of people would like to kill him, and that apparently there had been attempts on his life already. But he did not live in fear, and he often declined proper protection, unwisely, obviously, as it turned out. He had a single Washington police officer with him on the night that he went to the theater, and that officer was known to be, well, one of the worst officers in the police force, who had been written up for leaving his post, had been written up for sleeping on post, and wasn't there to help President Lincoln that night. He actually didn't even really want to go to the theater that night. He typically enjoyed it as a break from his stress, but with his stress lifted because the war was over, he's like, well, I don't really feel like going. But he went because it had been advertised that he was going to be there, and he didn't want to disappoint anybody. And so at the appointed time, he got into his carriage with his wife and their 2 guests, and rode off to Ford's Theater. And here's another spooky thing. There was a man who worked in the White House. I won't give you too many details, so you don't have to worry about his name. Who, to whom Lincoln routinely wished good night. And on this particular night, Lincoln did not say good night. Lincoln said goodbye, which, seems to indicate, again, for those who believe in the supernatural, which I do not, that he had some sense of what was to come. And I don't think he did. I think he thought he was going to see a show, and that's it. But they go to the theater. They arrive a little bit late, and so as he is shown into the presidential box, which is to the top right of the stage, the house lights are raised, and the show stops, and the band plays Hail to the Chief, and people applaud. Obviously, he's very popular at this moment. The war has just been won, and the people of Washington, D.C., and the Union in general have been celebrating. And so they sit down and they watch the show. And the person that you see behind me there on the far right, his name was John Wilkes Booth, and he was an actor. He was a very well-known actor. Keep in mind, at this time, there was no such thing as movies. They hadn't invented the technology to record anything like that. And so stage actors were the equivalent of our movie stars today. Now, I don't think John Wilkes Booth was the most famous, but people knew who he was. So I don't really have a comp for him. I'll give you one. It's probably an exaggeration. Let's say, like, George Clooney, maybe? Or Jake Gyllenhaal, somebody who's pretty well known, not Tom Cruise, not a gigantic star, but when you walk down the street, people know who you are. And so Booth was well known. He had performed in that theater. He collected his mail at that theater. So nobody thought anything of it when he came in. And people saw him go down the little corridor that leads to the stairway to the presidential box, and nobody thought anything of that either. However, there was supposed to be a guard there, a man named William Parker, this police officer that I mentioned before, and he was not there. Where was he? Nobody knows for sure. Some people say that he left his post because Lincoln was like, "Oh, you can go, don't worry about it," and he decided to go sit in the audience and watch the show. That's entirely possible. Lincoln was commonly like, you're good, you can go. He may have been at a tavern next door drinking. We don't know, and we probably never will. But he wasn't there. And so Booth, who hated Lincoln, Booth was a Southern sympathizer who thought Lincoln was this dictator who should be done away with, crept into the presidential box and withdrew a single-shot Derringer and fired it, as you can see in that image, into the back of Lincoln's head. And I'm going to keep this story short because we're running long on time already, but obviously this killed Lincoln. He died the next morning across the street at a boarding house because the doctor that came to his aid in the theater decided there was no way they could transport him back to the White House without him dying. And so they carried him across the street, and that's where he passed away. And in his place in the White House was a man named Andrew Johnson, who is not a villain. He didn't have anything to do with the assassination. But to replace Abraham Lincoln with Andrew Johnson is like, how can I say this? It's like replacing a Ferrari with a 1987 Ford Escort, if that makes any sense. This was a big step down in quality. He wasn't a bad person. He wasn't Abraham Lincoln. And he could not hold back the forces that were going to explode after Lincoln's assassination. Because Reconstruction, the period following the end of the Civil War, instead of it being run by Abraham Lincoln, who was wise and merciful and balanced and had good judgment, instead it was run by a guy. And that person couldn't hold back the feelings of revenge that the North now wanted for Lincoln's murder, and to blame the South for the Civil War, which some would argue is fair. But that's the story of Lincoln's assassination, is removing a great man from the stage, not literally the political stage, the historic stage, and replacing him with an ordinary guy who couldn't really fill his shoes. Okay, despite the little glitch we had there, I'm going to leave this up. I think this covers what we need to discuss. Write up a paragraph, answer the questions, use this, and write in your own words. Make it clear to me that this was in your own words. Don't paste in something. I know how people, and don't try to sound like me. Don't write like me. Just write like yourselves and say, well, this is a crazy story, or this is terrible, or this is boring, or whatever your opinion is. It's fine, but make it clear that it's your opinion and your understanding of what you just heard. Okay.